Hey guys, what's up? It's Big O Notation here, and today I'm going to be bringing you another deck profile. Today I'm going to be bringing you a Bulma deck. So recently I've been having a lot of fun playing a lot of red decks, specifically the two new decks from set 12, Launch and King Piccolo. I've been having extreme amounts of fun playing both of them. They've just got such really incredible unique mechanics and offer you a lot of draw power and a lot of different ways to play the decks. So I was looking through some other red leaders and red decks, and I figured that Bulma probably has quite a lot of potential just because of the amount of draw power and defense that she offers, as well as being able to run the Gogeta package to act as a mid-game finisher and just a really nice way to control the board. At the time of recording this, it is early set 12, so the early set 12 meta consists of the top 3 decks being Red Broly, Dark Broly and Mecha Frieza. So I've tried to adapt this deck a little bit to try and counteract each of those 3 decks. I feel like the Bulma deck is pretty strong against Red Broly because of its inherent draw power and defensive tools. It was already a very defensive deck with cards like Heroic Duo Videl, and just the ability to give all of your battle cards that are Saiyan and Earthlings blocker is really strong against any aggro deck. So it was already built to be very defensive, especially because the leader is 5,000 power on the front and 10,000 on the back. So obviously once you get to combo phase, the deck starts to fall apart a little bit because you have to start comboing extra cards in to whereas you normally wouldn't. So the deck was already very defensive before I made any changes to it, or before I started building it, and so that made the Red Broly matchup a lot better. Dark Broly is where the deck is probably going to struggle the most, because it is a mid-range control deck, the Bulma deck, and Dark Broly just completely wipes the floor with any sort of mid-range or control deck, because it turns the game into a game of resources, and Dark Broly is one of the best decks at the moment for manipulating resources because of its ability to utilize the drop area, and it has so much drop area effects because all of the Dark Brolys can bring themselves out for the drop area for 0 cost to your card advantage and economy. So it's just able to maintain a massive hand whilst being able to free play these 30k beat sticks that also gain additional effects when they come into play. However, I have managed to change a couple of the cards for the deck to attempt to sort of soften the matchup, try and make it a little bit more playable, and I'll get into that later. But it's definitely not completely lost when you play against Dark Broly with this deck now, I think. Onto Mecha Frieza. I think the Bulma deck is inherently pretty good against Mecha Frieza, just because of its inherent draw power again, and its ability to play the long game and gain just a bunch of resources over time. Also, it has some really good finishers, the Bulma deck, and I have tweaked a couple of the cards just to try and make the Mecha Frieza deck and matchup even more favourable for you. So all in all, I'd say the Dark Broly matchup is winnable, but it's tricky. It's very tricky and often very unlikely that you'll win, but that's what the side deck's for as well. You can side deck some cards for Dark Broly and try and help the matchup even further. And I think the important part in a triangle meta like this is that you have a decent matchup against at least 2 of the 3 decks, and then you can side deck for the 3rd, and I think this deck has a good matchup against Red Broly and Mecha Frieza. So that's why I think this deck could be a decent contender for the meta at the moment. Also, I just want to mention, as you can see, the layout of this deck profile is very different to the last one that I did, and that is because I'm using a new site. Rather than Shenron's Lair, I'm using a site called deckplanet.com. This is my first time using it, but I found it much easier to navigate, and I'd say it's a lot better than Shenron's Lair, and I'm probably going to proceed using this site because it's very easy and just nice and simple, lays out all of the cards in a really accessible way for everyone who plays the game. So I definitely recommend checking out this site if you are interested in building more decks. It also allows you to have little things like a description of your deck over here, and it just makes the whole deck building process so much easier. So I've written a little description. I'll probably change that a little bit more, go into a bit more detail over the coming few days. So anyway, let's get back into the deck profile. So the Bulma leader, on the front side, it has a permanent all red and yellow Saiyan and Earthling cards in your battle area, gain blocker, and activate main of draw one card. Very simple leader. 5k on the front though, so you want to be very sure that if you don't want to take the damage, you are negating or blocking attacks. You do not want to be comboing out of attacks with this leader because you just start leaking card advantage and it gets really tricky. For the Awaken, it's an untapped 2, which is amazing for this deck because you already have enough draw power. You don't need to draw 2 on the backside, on the Awaken, sorry. And because you're playing a red deck, energy is so important, and so an untapped 2 on the leader is just perfect. And then on the back side it has the same permanent and an activate main of drawing 2 cards, which is amazing. Just being able to draw 2 cards every single turn is really strong, and the defensive capabilities of the deck is really good as well. So I'll get into the deck. To start off with, we'll go through the Gogeta Chain. So I'm running 2 of each of the Son Goku and Vegeta prepping for fusion. This is just as a decent turn 1 play because you don't have very many turn 1 plays in the deck without these, and I just thought it would be nice to up the turn 1 plays of the deck just a little bit to increase ratios. And these cards, each of them checks the top 3 cards and searches for the other copy. So if you play Vegeta, it searches for a Son Goku. And then it places the rest at the bottom and then returns this card to your hand at the end of the turn, which is really nice because it allows you to potentially get both pieces in your hand for the Union fusions. I believe it's Union fusions that bring out the Gogeta. Yeah. And then we also are running 3 copies of each of the Son Goku and Vegeta Godly Auras. This creates a total of 5 of each Vegeta BR and Son Goku BR in the deck, which leaves you with 5 of each target for the Union Fusion, which is a great ratio, I think. And each of these guys get an effect when they're fused and when they're played. So when this card is played, you add up to 1 red extra card with an energy cost of 1 and no keyword skills from your drop area to your hand. You're pretty much never going to use that effect. I don't think that there are even any targets in the deck or in the side deck at the moment. So you only really use this as a fusion target because when it's discarded for fusion, you get to add a life to your hand, which is amazing because in this deck you want to be awakening very quickly because you want to be utilising this activate main to draw 2 cards per turn. Just means that you can start stacking up card advantage over your opponent, and that's when you really start to take control of the game. And then with the Vegeta, it has the same auto of when it's played, which you're never really going to use. And then when it's discarded for a fusion, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck and add a Gogeta BR card among them to your hand, and then if you added a card to your hand, you discard a card. This is amazing because when you fuse into the 5-drop Gogeta, it allows you to search for the 6-drop or the 8-drop if you're missing either of them, which is perfect because it just allows you to continue the chain even if you don't have all the pieces quite yet. So moving on to the Gogetas, the 5-drop. This is going to be your turn 3 play every single turn 3 hopefully, unless you're against a really aggressive deck. So it has a Union Fusion skill of tapping 3 red, drawing 2, and then using a Son Goku BR and a Vegeta BR. This is really good because it means that even though you're discarding 2, you're also drawing 2, so you maintain card advantage. Card economy is really important in this deck because the leader's drawing power just turns the game into a battle of resources. This Union Fusion effect can often mean you go plus if you use the Godly Aura cards in the Union Fusion, because you get their Union Fusion effects as well as the Draw 2. He also has a permanent of not being KO'd, which is really, really nice. It doesn't sadly do a huge amount in this meta, because the Red Broly deck doesn't really care about your battle cards, and the Dark Broly deck will be warping a lot of your battle cards. However, the fact that it has Deflect is amazing against Mecha Frieza, because it means that it can't be hit by cards like Cold Bloodlust, and if they're running a card like Giant Ball, it won't hit that either. So this card is really, really strong against Mecha Frieza. He also has an auto of if your leader is red, when he's played, you choose up to one of your red Unison cards, add a marker to it, and then choose all of your opponent's battle cards, and they get minus 15,000 power for the turn. I've really tried to take advantage of this auto in this deck, and I'll explain why just in a second. So, in fact, we'll leave that for later. We'll finish the Gogeta Chain and then come back to the auto in a second. So we're running 4 copies of the 6-cost Gogeta as well. He EX evolves on top of the 5-cost Gogeta I just mentioned, and he has Double Strike. You have to watch out because this Gogeta does not have Deflect, so you have to be very cautious when playing him against a deck like Mecha Frieza, because you have to keep track of what counterplays they've used over the course of the game and how many more they can use this turn. He has the same permanent though of not being able to be KO'd, and when a card evolves into him, you get to add 2 markers to your red Unison, and you can't play battle cards for the turn. That's actually a fine auto. It just gives you some more defense on your Unison, which is perfect, and often you don't want to be playing battle cards in your turn with this deck. You want to be playing them in your opponent's turn, apart from this Gogeta Chain. Because the deck is very defensive, you run a lot of counter attacks and counter plays, so a lot of your battle cards will be coming down on your opponent's turn rather than your own. Also, he has an auto of when this card or one of your opponent's cards attacks, you may choose one of your opponent's cards and it gets minus 20,000 power for the battle, and if you do, negate the skill for the turn. That's a really amazing auto both for offense and defense purposes. Just as soon as you get this card out, you're going to be able to get free advantage, because every time one of your opponent's cards attacks, you can just minus 20k power something, which will most likely kill it, and if not, it will definitely weaken the attack by quite a lot. So just a really strong card, and you want to be playing this card over your 5-cost Gogeta most turn 3s. We're also running the 8-cost Gogeta, which is a really strong card. We're running 2 copies of it, and he EX evolves by choosing 2 red cards from your hand and placing them in the drop area, and he EX evolves over a red Gogeta BR with an energy cost of 6. So that is this guy. You cannot, however, play this card and then EX evolve over him into the 8-cost in the same turn, because of the 6-cost auto triggering where you cannot play battle cards for the rest of the turn. So you have to watch out for that. You have to have your 6-drop Gogeta BR survive a turn and then play the 8-drop over it. So he has the same permanent of not being able to be KO'd, but he can also attack battle cards in active mode, and he has Double Strike. I believe the 6-cost Gogeta VR also has Double Strike, so that's really nice. And when a card evolves into this card, if there are no battle cards in play in your opponent's battle area, you get to choose up to 2 cards in your opponent's life, place them in the drop area, and then you can't play copies of this card for the turn. And when he attacks a battle card, he gets switched to active mode. That's not a once per turn auto, so you can effectively either use this as a board clear and then Double Strike swing for 35,000 power at the leader, or you can play him when your opponent's board is clear and use him as a finisher to try and burn through 4 life with his auto to burn through 2, and then the Double Strike swing to burn through the other 2. So he's basically just a really amazing finisher, because oftentimes your opponent's board will be clear from playing the 5-drop and 6-drop Gogeta the turn before you play him, so you'll only have to deal with like a couple of battle cards before you play him and burn through 2 life. The reason that I'm running him at 2 and I'm not running the new SS4 Broly secret rare that came out in, I believe, set 11, is because this card is just a much better finisher in my opinion. The Broly secret rare doesn't offer a huge amount in this meta because the Dark Broly deck uses its leader ability to gain pseudo combo power in a by adding power to the leader rather than actually using combo power. So the Broly SCR effect to reduce combo power doesn't actually really do anything against the Dark Broly deck. And then against Red Broly, they'll often have killed you by the time you get the chance to play it, or they won't really care and they'll just ignore it or try and kill it somehow, and then just continue to pressure your leader. And the Mecha Frieza deck will oftentimes have counterplays for it, or they'll have removal for it. So because of that reason, I'm running this Gogeta at 2 rather than one of this card and 1 copy of the Broly secret rare. Also, I think this card is just an amazing finisher, especially against Mecha Frieza, because if you keep track of the counterplays that they've used and make sure that you don't play this card when they possibly could have a Cold Bloodlust, then you're almost guaranteed to get this auto off, because Tyrannical Blow only hits cards that cost 3 or less, and other than that and Cold Bloodlust, the only other counterplay that they occasionally run is Giant Ball, which doesn't affect this card's auto. So unless they have Cold Bloodlust, you're almost guaranteed to be getting this auto off, which will burn through 2 of their life, and against Mecha Frieza, life is a massive resource because it's how they use a lot of their extra cards. So you definitely want to be using this as a finisher against Mecha Frieza. Anyway, onto the rest of the deck. My unison of choice for this deck is going to be the new Piccolo Jr. SR or SPR out of set 12. So I'll read through his effects. He has an auto of when your opponent activates a counter skill, you can KO an opponent's battle card of 15k power or less. This is not once per turn, this auto. So that's a really amazing auto, especially against Mecha Frieza, because you can start KOing any kind of token cards they have out. You can KO Chapels, you can KO Basils, you can KO lots and lots of things. And something I've especially tried to do in this deck is run a lot of cards that minus power off of your opponent's battle cards. So occasionally you might be able to KO like Bardock Apes or Bagamos or any kind of massive battle card that you wouldn't normally be able to hit with this auto. Moving on, his activate main is simple, just +1 draw a card. Again, this deck loves to draw cards, does a lot of draw power in this deck, and this just adds to that. Now, the main reason of my card choices for a lot of this deck is because of this activate main. So it has a -2 of choosing one of your red battle cards with an energy cost of 3 or less, and then choose all of your opponent's battle cards with power less than or equal to the chosen card and KO them, and then he gains Rejuvenate to remove 2 markers once per turn. So this is a really good activate main against swarm decks especially, and combined with cards like this Gogeta BR, which minuses 15,000 power on all of your opponent's battle cards when he's played. If you combine that with the King Piccolo Unison -2, you can actually kill cards of up to like 35,000 power just for playing this guy and then using a -2 on the Unison. Now, this Unison doesn't offer very much protection, sadly, because it's only 15k and it's only got a +1, so it's often very open to a lot of aggressive decks and aggressive strategies, and strategies that can deal with Unisons very early on. But luckily, this Gogeta will add a marker to your Unison when it's played, and this Gogeta adds 2 markers. So even though you'll be frequently using this -2, your Unison will stay on a very high number of markers throughout the game, And I'm also running a lot more ways to protect the Unison, because this Unison is basically your main centerpiece of the deck. Once you have this Unison out and you can gain so much advantage off of it, that's when this deck really starts to take over. So to continue on, I'm running 3 of this 1-drop King Piccolo cantrip. My friend Jamie put me onto this. He's also got a YouTube channel under Scrub Games. Be sure to check him out. He's a really good player. I'll have his link in the description and everything. But he put me onto this. He's running this kind of engine in his launch deck. So definitely check that out. The launch deck is really fun. I've been playing it a lot recently. And this card is, when it's played, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you add a red Namekian or Demon Clan card with energy cost of 4 or less, or a red Unison card with a specified cost of 2 to your hand. So I'm running 3 of him, and the targets for that are the 4 King Piccolo Unison, or Piccolo Junior Unison. So you're effectively running 7 copies of that, which is great. And you also run 2 more copies of King Piccolo, just as a couple more targets, so I'll get into them now. So this is a 4-cost King Piccolo, deflect double strike barrier, and if your leader is red, your opponent can't activate block skills when he attacks. Once per turn, when he attacks, you get to add a marker to your Unison, so just adding even more protection to your Unison card, just an amazing way to build up markers on your Unison so that you can keep using the -2 effect. And then he also has an auto of, when this card's attack is negated, you take 1 life and then you deal a damage to your opponent. This card is another really strong card against Mecha Frieza, because it has the deflect tag, and when its attack is negated, you automatically deal a life to your opponent. So it's really strong, and you often want to be swinging with this first against Mecha Frieza, because often they will want to be flying nimbusing, using Flying Nimbus on the first attack, but if they do that, then they're still taking the damage from this guy's attack. So it's just a really strong card against Mecha Frieza, and I recommend that you try it out and save it for turn 4-5 against Mecha Frieza and try and finish a game with them with it. Another King Piccolo card that we're running is this King Piccolo, a new ruler. He's double strike, and if you have a red Unison play with 3 or more markers, you get to play him for free, and he gains 5k when your leader is red, and your opponent can't activate blocker skills in response to him. But at the end of the turn, he gets sent to the warp. So basically, he's just a free 20k double strike. Really amazing card, and just perfect for trying to kill early game Unisons, because he's a 20k double striker, so any Unison that's coming down on turn 2 or 3 is going to be threatened by this battle card, because it's a double striker. It will also remove 2 markers from your opponent's Unison, so any kind of deck that wants a Unison down early game, this card is just amazing against. And he's also really good as another finisher, because he's a free 20k double strike. Who doesn't love that? So those are your targets for the 1-drop King Piccolo. You run a total of 8 targets, so you're going to be seeing them in the top 5 quite a lot. I think it's a really good ratio, and you also have a lot of different situational picks depending on your matchup and the current game state. So moving on to some of the more defensive cards, we're running 3 Heroic Duo Videl. This could easily be a 4 of. As you can see at the moment, I am running a 50 card deck, as it says at the top, but because of Bulma's draw power, it could easily be up to a 60 card deck and still be reasonably consistent. I just chose to run 50 cards because I like running 50 card decks and it maximizes consistency, but if you want to change any of the ratios around and run more than 50 cards, you're very welcome to. The deck will still run fine, probably. So, Heroic Duo Videl is just a counter attack where he plays himself and negates the attack. He has a permanent, but it's irrelevant in this deck because you don't run the counterpart card. The strong thing about this card is that he is a Earthling, so the Earthling tag means that it gets blocker, so it effectively can tank up to 2 attacks because it negates one and it will block another. So it's just a really, really good defensive card. For 1 energy, you're stopping 2 attacks, just amazing. Then our super combo of choice is for Raditz Saiyan Youth. This is because you want to be getting to 4 life as soon as possible anyway, and this is just the best super combo for when you get to 4 life in a red deck. So it places a card from your hand underneath the deck, and then you get to draw 2 cards from the top of the deck when you use it. Then I'm running 3 Yamcha Merciless Barrage. This could also be a 4 of. I was originally running it at 4, but I cut it down to 3 so that I could get to 50 cards. Just a counterplay of if you have a Unison with 2 or more markers in play, he comes out for free. And when your opponent plays a battle card, you can play him and then choose 2 of your opponent's battle cards and they get minus 15k power for the turn. So, like I said before, I'm running a lot of cards that minus power to try and make use of this Piccolo Jr. -2, and also he combines really nicely with your 6-drop Gogeta, because if you're against, say, Dark Broly, and they play one of their Dark Brolys with 30k power, you can minus 15 on it, which originally doesn't seem like a huge amount, but then combined with this Gogeta, if they attack you can minus 20k power it, so it'll go to minus 35k, and that'll be enough to kill any Dark Broly, because all of the Dark Brolys are 30k power. Also, another amazing thing about this card is that he's an Earthling, so you can bring him out for free, minus 15k 2 things. It's especially good against like Swarm or aggro decks, because you will often kill things with the minus 15,000, and then your leader gives him the blocker tag. So just a really, really nice card. Can theoretically stop up to 3 attacks if you play him correctly, for a total of 0 energy if you have your Unison out, which is just perfect. So for another finisher that I'm running in this deck, I'm running 1 copy of Fu Shrouded in Mystery. This is just an amazing generic finisher, and because you run such a control-based deck, you will slowly build up cards in the drop area with like the Union Fusion or just comboing stuff. So you can get to the Overrealm 10 by turn 6 most games, I'd say. And he just has a really nice auto of when he's played using Overrealm, your opponent can't activate skills other than their leader cards until the beginning of your next turn. So just an amazing finisher. He's also 30k double strike, and he's especially good against Mecha Frieza, because if they don't have Cold Bloodlust, they can counterplay with Giant Ball and put him in rest mode, but they won't be able to use any of their extra cards until your next turn, which is amazing because it completely shuts down almost the entire deck, because so much of the deck is based around extra cards or using the effects of battle cards. So this is really good against Mecha Frieza. Sadly, it's not so strong against Dark Broly, because although it will shut down any kind of negates that they have or blockers out, the leader effect is actually what allows him to use 30k battle cards as pseudo combo power. So it won't negate that effect, sadly, because it allows leader effects through. Onto the next card, we're running 4 Topper Righteous Aid. I was originally very conflicted about running this card and running Violent Rays. I think that against the current meta, Violent Rays is very, very good, because Dark Broly, all of the Dark Broly cards are 30k power, and so it will stop any of the Dark Brolys from attacking. And Red Broly, only the 3 cost and 1 cost are under 20k power, because the rest have the Servant tag or they're above 20k power. So Violent Rays will also stop those attacks. And against Mecha Frieza you can stop things like the Great Ape Bardock, and you can stop Bagamo. You won't be able to stop things like Basil, sadly, because it's 19k power. So you may be thinking, why on earth would you run Topo after bringing up those great points about how Violent Rays is so strong against the meta at this current state? And my reasoning is because the meta is so early in its development at this point in time. Set 12 only came out like 1 or 2 weeks ago, so people are still playing, still trying out new strategies, and still playing like all of the new Set 12 decks and figuring out what's good. A lot of the reason that the Mecha Frieza Dark Broly and Red Broly decks have been pushed up to tier 1 is because Dark Broly and Red Broly were good last format, and the other decks that were good last format got nerfed in some way, and Mecha Frieza was a good leader before the reboot, so people have obviously been playing it after its reboot version came out quite a lot, and so they've come to the conclusion that that deck is really strong. And I would agree that those 3 decks are very strong, but it's very important in an early meta to watch out for the rogue decks. There are a lot of decks right now that are just underneath tier 1 that could easily break through to tier 1 status, and Toppo is going to be a lot better against them because we don't know currently what a lot of them will be doing, because like the meta is so wide open. So Violent Rays is just too specific of a card to be running in the main deck at 4 of over Toppo, in my opinion. I can definitely see a 2-2 split or a 3-1 split, and in this version I am side decking Violent Rays at 4 copies as well, because it's so strong against the meta at the moment. So to conclude my little talk about why I'm running Toppo over Violent Rays at the moment, I'm only running it to account for all of the rogue strategies that will be floating around in such an early meta state. As the meta develops more, if it stays that Dark Broly, Red Broly and Mecha Frieza are the top 3 decks, and that is completely undisputed, and that is maintained, and the other rogue strategies fall into like tier 2, tier 3, then definitely switch out Toppo for Violent Rays. It will just do the same thing as Toppo, except it's harder to play through and it is 1 energy less. So that's my little talk on why I think Toppo is good at the moment over Violent Rays, but the more time goes on in this meta, the better Violent Rays will be over Toppo. So for the last few cards, I'm running 3 Mai King Piccolo's Underling. This could easily be a 4 of as well. I cut this card down to 3 just to get it down to 50 cards. But the reason it could be 4 of is because it's a cantrip. When it's played, you draw 1, which is amazing. And it is a barrier, and it has the Earthling tag, so it's a barrier blocker. So the reason that this card is so strong is obviously it's a barrier blocker, so it's really, really hard to interact with, and there's not a huge amount of barrier removal in this meta because there's not a huge amount of barrier in this meta. The top decks of Red Broly, Dark Broly, Red Broly and Dark Broly don't really run any barrier cards, and I don't believe Mecha Frieza runs any either. So there's no reason for people to be running barrier removal, so that means that this card is almost always going to be sticking to the board and being able to draw 1 and then stop an attack. Obviously what this card is known for is being a silver bullet against blue decks, which is especially Baby, because when the opponent switches their energy to active mode using a counter skill, you can place 1 of their life and 1 of their energy in the drop area. Blue doesn't have a massive place in the meta at the moment. Blue is probably the weakest colour. So ordinarily this card is not very good in the meta, but the main reason I'm running it is because, as I said earlier, it's a cantrip with barrier blocker. So it's just good generically as a 1-cost card, and if you run into a blue deck, this card will do wonders for you. Also, a lot of Bulma lists I've seen have been running like the Spike, Bandages and Baba package. The reason that I'm not running that is because there's so much removal at the moment outside of barrier. So Red Broly is running the Piccolo Junior Unison from the Draft Box 3, and that has a +1 of -5k'ing something, which is it's out to the Dark Power Black Mouse Saiyan. The reason that I'm not running the Spike, Bandages, Baba package is because the top decks are running cards like that. So Red Broly has the Piccolo, which will just burn through a copy of any of those cards once per turn. Dark Broly is just able to warp your blockers away, and Mecha Frieza is able to tap them down and swing at them, and it just feels like a waste of a card against Mecha Frieza because it's a resource game and you want to be drawing more cards than playing them. So that's why I'm running this as my only proper like one cost blocker. However, aside from that, we are still running 10 total turn 1 plays in the 2 prepping for fusions, the 4 prepping for fusions, sorry, the 3 King Piccolos and the 3 Mais, so you have a decent chance of seeing them turn 1. So it's still, like, you still have a good ratio, and that's another reason I'm not running the Spikes, Bandages, Baba package. And then lastly, it just takes up too much space in the deck. I think that you want this deck to be as generic as possible, so that it can widely have a good matchup against a lot of different decks, and that's why I'm running such generic cards. Other than the Gogeta package, everything is a good card on its own, and it also has some synergy within the deck. For my last card, I'm just running 1 copy of Exploiting Weakness. My reasoning for running this is because I was looking for one last card. This could realistically be anything. It could be a 4th copy of some of the other cards I've mentioned. It could be, say, Max Power Kamehameha. That's a really strong card in this meta because all of the top decks are playing cards for less than their original energy cost, so you can often hit cards out for free with that. And also Max Power is just a negate, which is really strong in this deck. So this is a very flexible spot. The reason that I am running this is because it's another board clear for minus 20k power, so it has great synergy with the Piccolo Jr. Unison, with the Gogeta if you manage to play that in the same turn as the Exploiting Weakness, with also the 6 cost Gogeta to get through some bigger battle cards. And also it has great synergy with Yamcha, because for a 3 energy you can minus 15k on 2 things and then minus 20k the entire board. So that's a really strong combination. I was considering running the SSB Kaioken Son Goku Concentrated Destruction, because it does a similar thing to Vegeta. Instead it KOs everything that's 20k power or less. And then it also has a 2 energy effect in your hand where you can discard it, and minus 25k something ignoring barrier. However, as I said earlier, barrier is not very prevalent in this meta, so I don't think that that effect is going to come up all that often, and minusing power with this deck and the ability to play Vegeta on both players' turns rather than just your own makes it a lot more flexible in my opinion for the current meta and for this deck. However, I am very open to testing the Kaioken Son Goku, and I think that it could easily be just as good a card in the deck. I just want to cover a couple of the side deck cards I've got listed here. So I'm running 3 Shu. This is specifically for Red Broly, just to help with the matchup a little bit more, because it can counterplay your opponent's 1 cost Red Brolys. And that's really strong, and it will mean that the leader effect will not trigger as well, because the Red Broly didn't even come into play, and it will just shut down a lot of their chain. Another card I was considering running was Wolffang Fist, and I think that this also could be in the deck, because a lot of the deck is based around minusing power, and so it has a lot of synergy with a lot of the other cards. Just being able to kill stuff on your opponent's turn is really strong. My reasoning for not running it was because I felt like on its own it was really weak against the current meta. So against Mecha Frieza, a lot of their cards are going to be like Bergamo and Great Ape Bardock. Those are going to be the main cards that attack you, and those are 20k power. So if you minus it by 15k, if your leader's on the front side it will still go through, and if it's on the back side they only need to combo 5k more power. And it doesn't even kill the cards. Against Dark Broly, this does very little, because it will only set your opponent's Dark Brolys to 15k power, which is still a lot, and it will still be way more than enough to pressure down your leader, because your leader is so weak on both sides. So that's my reasoning for not running it in this list. It could definitely be in there for, instead of like the Vegeta exploiting weakness and just a couple of the other cards. The thing I like about this deck is it's very flexible, so you can basically pick and choose whatever you want. After Image Technique is another card I was considering running, and I'm currently siding it at 3 just for the aggressive matchups like Red Broly. I don't really have a massive reason as to why I'm not running this. It's just space, and I've had like 4 toppers in there as well, so I figured that I had enough negates and counter plays to try and stop the opponent's attacks. I think the deck is defensive enough without After Image. I also have the 4 Violent Rays, as I said earlier. I was considering running this over Topo, and there's a very, very strong argument to be running this at the moment, and I think that later down the line I will definitely be switching them out. I'm also siding the 4th Yamcha, along with the 4th Mai. This is just because I was originally running those at 4 each, but I cut them down to 3 to try and get the deck to 50 cards for you guys, because I think 50 is the optimal number for a deck, because it allows for you to see, to have the highest percentage chance to see any particular card you want at any given time. So it's just allows for maximum consistency on each individual card, which is really, really strong. And then I was also siding 1 of this Kaioken Son Goku. As I said earlier, this card could definitely be in the deck instead of Vegeta, and an argument for it being in the deck is that it allows you to have more access to board clears, because this Piccolo Jr. requires you to have a 3-cost or less guy on the board, and your only targets for that are like strong are going to be this King Piccolo and this Yamcha, and occasionally you might be forced into playing one of the Son Goku or Vegetas to use the -2 as well, but it's mostly going to be these 2 cards. And Kaioken Son Goku allows you another 3-cost at 15k, which is really strong, but it also allows you a similar effect to the -2 on the Unison. So that was my consideration for running it, and also if Barrier makes a return in the meta, you definitely want to be running this over your SS Vegeta exploiting weakness. So that was the deck profile. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you made it this far, be sure to like the video if you did, and definitely subscribe if you want to see more deck profiles and gameplay. I might be trying to play this deck in the next round of my Rising Phoenix Odysseys tournament, because I think that it's, not only is it a really fun deck because of the draw power, I just love drawing cards, that's why I enjoy playing red, but it's a really good deck as well. The Gogeta Chain and the Bulma deck are so generic that this deck will almost always be good for the foreseeable future. And as I said before, you can switch out pretty much any of these bottom cards for whatever you want to play. Like this deck is so amazingly flexible that if you want to play the deck but you don't feel like playing, say, the Namekian engine that I've run in here, because you feel like you see the Unison enough, then you can run more defensive cards like Wolfang Fist, or whatever you want. You can change around this deck in so many different ways. That's why I really enjoy it. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Any support is really, really appreciated. I'm only a small channel at the moment, but I'm really hoping to grow and just help educating people in Dragon Ball and having a laugh along the way. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a lovely day.